You probably have a fantasy draft coming up. That's why you're here for this video. Well, in this video, we're going to be talking about the 7 wide receivers you should be drafting in fantasy this year. Now, I've helped thousands of people win their fantasy league over the last few years, and I plan to do the same for you in this video. And we are going to start in round 10, which is crazy, of fantasy drafts with this man right here, the rookie Keon Coleman in Buffalo. And here's the thing. I think we got off on the wrong foot with Keon Coleman. When he was a prospect, he was a polarizing one. A lot of people didn't like him compared to the other top 5 rookie wide receivers, so it gave a sour taste in people's mouths when he was actually drafted. And not only that, but the Buffalo Bills draft strategy, if you will, of trading down with the Chiefs here and the Chiefs took a wide receiver, of trading down with the Panthers here and the Panthers took a wide receiver in Xavier Legette, kind of made people go, oof, what are the Bills doing? And then they ultimately took Coleman in the second round, a prospect people really didn't like all that much compared to those other guys, and it kind of put this, okay, we don't like Keon Coleman taste in a lot of people's mouths. But we need to kind of reevaluate things here, because this is a rookie wide receiver in the second round, now being paired up with Josh Allen in an offense that needs a wide receiver one, and an organization that continuously this offseason, including their general manager, Brandon Beane, has said Keon Coleman is going to be leaned on as a rookie. And the reason for that is because the Bills don't have their veteran pass catchers anymore. Stephon Diggs is gone. He's now on the Texans. You have Gabe Davis gone. He's now on the Jaguars right here. You could even see some of their other veteran receivers that were on the team. Trent Sherfield, who had a decent role last year. Deontay Hardy, who had a decent role at times last year, and then towards the postseason. These 4 guys are all gone, and yes, the rookie Keon Coleman is coming in with the opportunity to be the number 1 receiver for Josh Allen. Now, I know some people are like, oh, since Diggs and Gabe Davis are gone, this offense is going to take a step back. I don't believe that, and neither does Vegas. The Bills currently have the 6th shortest odds to lead the NFL in points scored, and in most projection systems, they're in the top 5 in total offense this year, because this is still an offense that has Josh Allen, probably one of the 2 best quarterbacks on the planet right there with Patrick Mahomes, and he's still going to be playing behind a strong offensive line that is arguably, if not definitely, a top 10 unit. So you have that factor, and then you also have the factor that Gibbs and Davis are gone, and as you can see right here, according to FTNFantasy.com, Buffalo has 173 vacated targets, the 2nd most in the NFL. Their vacated receiving yards over 1,300, the 2nd most in the NFL. There's a lot to go around here, and a newcomer, second-round rookie that is an outside receiver downfield paired with Josh Allen's big arm, yeah, he's going to see a lot of that leftover production from guys like Diggs and Gabe Davis. And another thing to point out is last year, Joe Brady took over this offense mid-season after Ken Dorsey got fired. He didn't have an offseason to implement the offense he wanted. Now he does. That's important. Now, I know people aren't as excited about Keon Coleman's profile as like this outside receiver. Maybe there's some concerns about separation, but his draft capital and just the need to get him on the field is going to have him on the field. His competition is Khalil Shakur. I think he's also a decent late-round fantasy option. Curtis Samuel, who again, decent fantasy option, but Curtis Samuel dealing with a turf toe injury, might not even be ready for week 1 at this point, not getting valuable reps as a newcomer, free agent Samuel to this team, like Keon Coleman is with Josh Allen in camp. And here's the big thing. Josh Allen goes as like a 2nd-round pick in fantasy drafts, yet all of his receivers go in the 10th round or later. If Josh Allen is going to pay off a 2nd-round draft price, I know he has mobile upside, but he's going to have at least 1 and likely 2 big pass catchers. I think tight end Dalton Kincaid can be one of those, and I think Keon Coleman is going to be the other one. Now, for what it's worth, through the first 2 preseason games, Coleman has played 100% of the Bills' starter snaps according to PFF and Nate Yonke over at PFF, which is pretty good, as you can see right here, for a guy who's going in round 10 of fantasy drafts right now. And where is he going around? Well, he's going around players like Gus Edwards, a near 30-year-old running back in a backfield where he might not even be the lead back. He's going around guys like a Trey Benson, who's the RB2 to start the season. I think he has some upside, but he's the RB2 to start the season, and so is Zeke Elliott as an older veteran that's not maybe as efficient anymore compared to a young, exciting player in Keon Coleman, who literally from his coaches, his general manager, and his quarterback have been said that he's going to be leaned on heavily this year. Target Keon Coleman. He's somebody you should be drafting. Now, the next man up that you should be drafting is the Chargers' potential number 1 receiver, and that's going to be Josh Palmer, because this guy right now, Josh Palmer, here's a couple of things that you should keep in mind. He's currently going in the 13th round of fantasy drafts outside the top 150 picks, and he has the best connection with Justin Herbert. He has 3 years of connection with him when no other pass catchers on this team do, and here's the big thing. Justin Herbert's been dealing with an injury the last 3 weeks or so. Right here, you can see that, a foot injury. It's a plantar fascia injury. Now, he did return to practice a couple of days ago, but for these 3 weeks, that was very valuable time that Herbert missed to get a connection with his new rookie receiver, Ladd McConkey. Free agent signings like the tight ends Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst and DJ Shark, the wide receiver. Josh Palmer already has a connection. It doesn't matter that he didn't have those 3 weeks. Now, look, I've been on record to say that I don't think Palmer's an elite wide receiver, but that was when he was competing with tougher competition like a Keenan Allen and a Mike Williams. And even in those seasons when he was competing with those guys, he finished as the wide receiver 44 right here, and the wide receiver 42 and the wide receiver 44. And the crazy part is all those guys are gone. So is Gerald Everett. So is Austin Eckler. And now he's going, Josh Palmer, as the wide receiver 59 in fantasy draft. drafts. He's never finished that bad the last 2 years with all that competition, and now they're gone. And we've actually seen Palmer in 11 games with Keenan Allen out these last few years as a starter with Herbert, and here's what he's produced. 12.6 fantasy points per game on 7.5 targets per game. That's pretty good production. Now, I know a lot of people get concerned about the new coaches, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. It's going to be a run-first offense. I get that. It definitely will be, but here's the thing. It's not like they've never produced high-quality receiving options. Because these guys, Jim Harbaugh, and then you can scroll down to the offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, they were together in their time in San Francisco about a decade ago, and during that time, they produced some guys who got a lot of volume at the wide receiver position. Let's check it out, including the regular season and postseason during that time. In 2012, Michael Crabtree had 146 targets. In 2013, Anquan Boldin had 150 targets, and then in 2014, both guys had over 100 targets. That was 10 years ago. The game has evolved to only become more pass-happy since then, and they have a better pass-first quarterback in Justin Herbert compared to Colin Kaepernick all the way back then. I think at least one guy, if not two, can earn 100 to 120 targets in this offense. And if we're looking at who those guys can be, I think Palmer is a shoo-in to be one of them. He has a connection with the team. He seems, based on preseason usage, to be the wide receiver one on this team, especially on the outside. Shark right now is competing apparently with other rookies on this team like Brendan Rice, a 7th-round pick. And then Ladd McConkey's probably the other option. He can win in the slot and out wide, but currently right now in the preseason and camp, he's being used often in the slot, which isn't a bad thing, can still earn a lot of targets there. But in terms of explosive plays on the outside, it looks like that should be Josh Palmer's role. And with all those guys gone, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler, we showed you this page earlier from FTN Fantasy and vacated targets. The Chargers have by far the most, 250 vacated targets and over 1,700, nearly 1,800 receiving yards to go around. Of course, all of this isn't going to just go to one or two guys like a Josh Palmer. It's going to be distributed, but Palmer, that means he's going to see an even larger role than he had seen in previous years. So when I'm looking at the board and I see Josh Palmer in round 13, around a backup running back in Antonio Gibson, literally around kickers like Jake Elliott and even Jahan Dotson, who's now the wide receiver 3 on the Eagles, I am going all out and getting Josh Palmer here because I think at the very least he's going to see 100 plus targets, if not be the number one receiver for Justin Herbert. Now, before I get into a 5th round wide receiver that nobody seems to want to be drafting, but he's going to win fantasy leagues, I want to ask you a question. Simply put, do you want to win your fantasy league? Well, if so, click this button right here and it'll take you to this page where you can sign up this season through our partner below for a risk-free blueprint. All you do is sign up through the partner for your opportunity to get my fantasy blueprint risk-free. And what does this mean? Fantasy blueprint has all the tools you need for your draft, but even if you've already drafted, every single week of the season, I send you a daily tool, waiver wire tiers, rest of season rankings, projections, matchup notes, and even more. And if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, like I said, it's risk-free. You get your one-time payment of $10 completely back when you sign up through a partner. So if you want to join the over 15,000 people currently using the fantasy blueprint this year, which your league mates might have it, so you just want to keep up with them, you might as well get this. Well, click the link in the description below or scan this QR code right here on the screen so you can increase your chances of winning and smacking around your buddies. All right, now that 5th round wide receiver I was talking about, it's pretty interesting right now. It's T. Higgins, who goes as the 58th overall player in drafts. And here's the thing about T. Higgins. In past seasons, this guy was going at the very latest, a 4th round pick, usually a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Now we get him in round 5, even though really nothing has changed. So the question becomes, why is this the case? Why are we getting him so late right now? Well, it's because people are having recency bias, and we can scroll down to what he did last year. He finished as the wide receiver 40, but this is extremely skewed. 11.5 fantasy points per game. It lacks absolute context, because if you just looked at that and said, oh, he's like not even in the top 40 receivers, blah, it was a bad season, he stunk. No, you're not paying attention. Because last season, as you can see right here, T. Higgins only played 12 total games. He was playing hurt in some of these games, but he actually left 3 of these games early. So overall, he only played in 9. Let's get it right, 9. I had 8 up there first. 9 completed games last year, and here's what he did in those games that he started and completed. He averaged 8.3 targets and 14.1 fantasy points per game, which if you take those numbers, that is a top 25 wide receiver in terms of production and volume. And keep in mind, this includes a week 1 game last year where if you rostered T. Higgins, you know how this one went. You see him right down here. This dude had 8 targets in week 1, 0 receptions. He had 8 targets. He was one of only 7 wide receivers. 7. I'm keeping in the wrong hands up here, people. I do not know what's going on. I'm telling you, it's early in the morning. It's actually not. It's 1:46 p.m. It's a long day. It's a long day right now. Anyways, he's one of 7 wide receivers in the past decade to get at least 8 targets and not put up a fantasy point. Obviously, that was an outlier performance. He returned like the next week and had a massive game. I think he scored 2 touchdowns, but that includes that game. He had over 14 fantasy points per game with a 0 in there. And keep in mind, Joe Burrow was injured to start the season and then didn't complete the season due to his wrist surgery that he had to get. So you had T. Higgins without his quarterback really the entire year. But if we were to use RotoViz here and look at the game splits in his career when he has Joe Burrow out there, in 46 games with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins is averaging over 14 fantasy points per game and 7.4 targets per game, which again is a top 24 fantasy producer, not top 40 like he finished last season. So when you get a healthy T. Higgins with a healthy Joe Burrow, he's usually finishing as a top 20 receiver or so, as a 3rd round, maybe a 2nd round fantasy pick. But right now you get to take him at the back of the 5th round in drafts anytime anytime he's on the board in round 5, he's an auto draft for me, even if I already have 2 receivers. And just one more thing to sweeten the pot even more for you, Tyler Boyd is now gone. This 30-year-old receiver is gone and went to the Tennessee Titans. He followed his former offensive coordinator and went to the Titans. Okay, great. And really, they didn't replace Tyler Boyd. Sure, they have Andre Yusavash and they have the rookie Jermaine Burton, as you can see right here, who will fill in as the wide receiver 3 on this team. But the big thing is you might see a little bit more slot usage for T. Higgins since they don't have a standard slot receiver now on the team. Even if it only goes up by 10%, that means more catchable targets and yards after the catch for Higgins. All right, on to the next one. We go from a 5th round wide receiver to an 11th round wide receiver. I'm looking at another rookie. We had Keon Coleman earlier. Now I'm looking at 11th round pick Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who reportedly right now is heating up in camp. This is a guy who like the first week and a half to 2 weeks of camp wasn't making a lot of noise. It was kind of slow for him to get going. And now these last week and a half or 2, he's been dominating in joint practices. And through 2 preseason games, he appears to be a starting outside receiver. And this is the snaps and routes are courtesy of PFF and Nate Yonke. You can see right here, he was one of the Jaguars' starting wide receivers with Gabe Davis in the first preseason game when all the starters played. Christian Kirk did not play in the second one, neither did Gabe Davis. Kirk only played in the slot and 3 wide receiver sets. Now, I don't think this usage can be all that sticky. It was just like 1 or 2 drives with the starters, but it's showing you, especially in the second game when Brian Thomas played as well, that they want this young guy to get out there, get experience, play on the outside with Trevor Lawrence because he pairs so perfectly with Lawrence. This is a first-round pick who's just 21 years old and an extreme athlete with a unique build. 6'3", 210 pounds. Okay, that's great size to begin with. And then look at this. He's kind of built like Christian Watson, if you will. Runs a 4.33. So he runs a 4.33. He's not like 6'1" and 185 pounds, right? He's not that. He's 210 pounds with this type of dynamic and explosive speed. And it's not just all athleticism. In college last year, this is why he was a first-round pick at LSU against tough defensive backs in the SEC. He puts up over 1,100 yards, nearly 1,200 yards while competing with Jamar Chase for targets, or not Jamar Chase, while competing with Malik Neighbors for targets. And he has 17 receiving touchdowns, which led all of college football. The guy knows how to find the end zone, and that's exactly in his rookie year what his role could be on the outside with Lawrence, big plays. And the reason why he's going to have a lot of opportunity and the reason why the Jaguars drafted him in general is because they didn't re-sign Calvin Ridley, who leaves behind 136 targets, or their veteran receiver from the last few years in Zay Jones. And a lot of people will say, oh, this is like a step down on the offense because Calvin Ridley's gone. I think Calvin Ridley's a talented receiver, but he was misused on this offense last year as just like a field stretcher. That's not where he wins. So I think they're really not going to miss his role all that much. If anything, I think the field stretch role is improved because that's exactly what Brian Thomas does so well. Now, Thomas will definitely have competition in Christian Kirk, who I do believe is a number 1 receiver on this team, around 7 pick in fantasy. I do believe he can beat out Gabe Davis, even though he did sign a contract. Christian Kirk's also on a high contract, and the draft capital there is there for Brian Thomas. So I think they're all incentivized to get on the field, and Thomas was actually put on the field by this new organization, or at least management team that's in there right now, in terms of where he was drafted. And then you have Evan Ingram in here. So here's Evan Ingram, and here's the interesting thing. We know Evan Ingram is going to feast in the short to intermediate parts of the field. We know Christian Kirk is going to feast in the short to intermediate parts of the field. That's fine. That's not where Brian Thomas is going to win, at least in his rookie year. He's going to earn ideally 90 to 100 targets on the outside, creating big plays of 20 plus yards. And that's exactly what the doctor ordered for Trevor Lawrence, who last season Trevor Lawrence ranked in the NFL in deep attempts 71st, or 5th. Sorry, he had 71 deep attempts overall. Oh my God, what a day. It's not even a Monday. I believe it's a Thursday today. At least I got that right. Okay, so top 5 in deep attempts last year for Trevor Lawrence. We know this guy has a big arm. He was completing those deep attempts at a highly accurate rate last year, and now he has an insane speedster, athletic freak size-wise, and Brian Thomas to throw to. That's good. So yes, in around 11 of your fantasy drafts, and he's probably creeping up right now into like round 10, I do want Brian Thomas. Like he goes around, again, a couple of kickers here is where he's going. A defense in the San Francisco 49ers. Quarterbacks in like Justin Herbert, who's going to be in a run-first offense, and Kirk Cousins, who's fine, but he's not a mobile quarterback overall, and he has nowhere near the upside of what this rookie wide receiver can give you, the beautiful person. So there's a wide receiver who's a younger guy, and he goes outside the top 11 or top 10 rounds in drafts. And now a guy who goes in round 13, a veteran, which is not normally something I want to target, but I want to talk about Mike Williams of the New York Jets here, because in this range of the draft, I find myself taking him a lot. And here's the interesting part. He's a 30-year-old receiver. Coming off of a torn ACL. Why do you want to draft this guy, Sal? Well, let me explain. The one positive thing was his ACL was early on in the season last year, so he's actually already back at practice. You can see right here, Mike Williams looked very impressive in individual drills. This was in mid-August, and then more recently, and this is now this week is what this tweet is referring to, Mike Williams plans to participate in team drills next week. So this week, as of right now, he's participating in team drills. So he's already back. He's full steam ahead. He's ready to play for week 1 unless there's a setback, which there shouldn't be at this point. So you're getting a healthy Mike Williams. It's not like, oh, maybe he'll play by week 4. No, he's going to play week 1 right away as a starting outside receiver for Aaron Rodgers. And let's not forget what Mike Williams has done in his past. With the Chargers, he's had multiple 1,000-yard seasons, and he's a big play receiver. You can see right here, as recent as a couple of years ago, he had his best season of over 1,100 yards yards right here. And the big thing is this dude is probably going to be the leading red zone target for Aaron Rodgers on this team. Let's go back to it right here on Player Profiler. He's 6'4" and 118 pounds. Garrett Wilson's a great operator, can win in the slot, can be shifty in the red zone, but in terms of just a big body that can go out on the outside and win on one-on-ones, those slot fades that Rodgers loves to throw in the red zone, that's going to be Mike Williams. And Rodgers is going to get to do it behind a top 5 offensive line, which when they're not in the red zone and they're looking downfield on the outside for these 20-plus yard completions too, and this is courtesy of PFF, by the way, to a Mike Williams, he's going to have more time to do so, let those plays develop. Of course, there's the injury concerns for Williams, but that's already baked in. He's a 13th round pick. You're not spending a 5th or a 6th round pick like you had to do 1 to 2 years ago. So right now, when I see Mike Williams is going in round 13 of drafts, and I mean, like, let's look at some of the guys he's going around. Obviously, there's some kickers and defenses here. Jalen Wright, who I think Jalen Wright's exciting. He's had a good preseason, but Jalen Wright is legitimately right now a running back 3 on his team. I get it if something happens to Raheem Mostert, but we don't have to play those if games, right? We don't have to play if something happens with Mike Williams. He's going to be starting on the outside week 1 for a top 5, if not the number 1 overall roster in the NFL with the Jets. That's how talented they are. All right, now before we get into these next young players that I do think have a ton of opportunity to win leagues and you should be drafting them, I want to let you know that nearly 70% of you beautiful people are not subscribed to this channel. Again, this might go on deaf ears most of the time. I just want to give you that urge. I want to get this as close to 50% as we can, because when you subscribe, it really helps me. It really helps this channel grow and allows me to make even more content for you beautiful people completely free here on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button. And that takes us now to another player, and it's Xavier Worthy in round 8. Look, one of my favorite picks I've been talking about all off season long, because this guy just continues to dominate. We've seen it now in the preseason. I could pull it up right here. In preseason week 2, when the starters were out there for about a half or so without Marquise Hollywood Brown, and these stats are courtesy of PFF, the routes and the snaps here, you had going out there 83% of the snaps. Xavier Worthy earned 4 targets, and on those 4 targets created 2 explosive plays of 20+ yards, which is just the name of the game with this guy, including one of those plays right here where you can see, his speed out of the slot, just an easy touchdown. No one could keep up with him, and that play is going to be something you see a lot this year. That's the play that Tyreek Hill would run, out of the slot or out wide, usually out of the slot, a long developing route over the middle of the field where you run from one side of the field to the other, because Xavier Worthy has 4.2 speed and he can beat anybody, any secondary, anytime he wants. So yeah, I like that out of Xavier Worthy, a guy they traded up for in the first round, extremely talented. All he did was produce in college, and now he goes as the 3rd Chiefs wide receiver off the board in round 8. Tons of upside here and value, in my opinion, when you're going to be paired up with Patrick Mahomes, who the team wants to reportedly in camp right now, and based on their offseason moves, throw a lot more this season. Because Patrick Mahomes is coming off of his worst season as a downfield thrower, and no reason of his own. Air yards per attempt, how basically deep, how much yards per attempt he's throwing for downfield is just 33rd in the NFL, because he didn't have the personnel to do it. He didn't trust Marquise Hollywood Brown, who couldn't get open, and same with Justin Watson, couldn't get open enough last year on the outside. Now he has the pieces because they signed Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy. And if you're not familiar, Xavier Worthy set the combine record with a 4.21 40 time, and yes, even though he's smaller at like 165 pounds, although I think he's going to play around 170 to 175. I think at the combine when he weighed in at this weight, it was just to be a little bit smaller to run that record-setting 40 time, which ended up getting him a first-round pick, so it was kind of worth it. More money for him. Even though he's smaller, he plays bigger, and that did not hold him back ever in college from being, honestly, a mega producer. Because this dude was in college for 3 seasons, and right away as an 18-year-old true freshman, he earns a 30% target share at Texas. Pretty good. He follows that up with a 29% target share. Then last year, while competing with other NFL draft picks in tight end, Jatavian Sanders, and second-round pick Adonai Mitchell wide receiver, still earns a 26% target share and 1,000 yards. Was always the alpha number 1 receiver 3 years in a row, despite being 170 pounds, because the guy can win in the short areas and definitely the deep areas with his speed. And now he's paired up with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They're going to use his skill set perfectly behind a top 10 offensive line, which just gives Mahomes even more time to find Worthy downfield. So a wide receiver you should be drafting in round 8 of your drafts right now, no doubt about it. Sometimes he falls to round 9, which is crazy. I just took him in like an experts league, you can call it. I did it with Flock Fantasy and some other channels, Fantasyland and some other channels out there, Fantasy Stock Exchange. We did it in person. I had to take him in like round 6, I think, because those dudes were going to take him. Now, another young player, another rookie I want to talk about here goes in the 14th round of the draft, sometimes the 13th round, and it's Xavier Legette, the first-round pick. Yes, he was a first-round pick from the Carolina Panthers, and here's the deal. He started camp with a couple of different injuries, so really the news wasn't there on him, and he started to fall in fantasy drafts. But now this fella is healthy, and again, let me remind you, they traded up in the first round to get Xavier Legette, and the coach Dave Canales, before they even drafted him, was hyping up this guy as somebody that they were looking at, and he was trying not to kind of spoil the secret that they were going to go and get him. Now, I know what you're thinking right away. Sal, don't you know what his competition is? Yes, I do, because I really like Deontay Johnson as an 8th-round pick in fantasy. I think he's also a fine player, but that doesn't mean that Xavier Legette, a guy who is, let's just show you right here who this guy is, 6'1", 221 pounds, a freak with 4.39 speed. I mean, this is literally DK Metcalf in terms of the body size, his speed, and just how he plays, wins at the catch point, dominates after the catch with his speed and physicality. I think that first-round pick with that type of a talent can find his way to being a productive player in round 14 of fantasy fantasy drafts. Literally just needs 100 targets as a rookie, 5 or 6 per game. I think he can muster that. At least it's in his range of outcomes. Because he's the only guy, no disrespect to Deontay Johnson, no disrespect to a 34-year-old Adam Thielen, at least at this point in his career. Xavier Legette is the only guy out of these 3 who can have those explosive plays, win on the outside, dominate after the catch with speed. Like Deontay Johnson will be a tactician or a technician. There we go, people, in the short to intermediate parts of the field. Similar things to a lesser extent with Adam Thielen, but who's going to dominate for those explosive plays? It's going to be Xavier Legette. I think I just malfunctioned earlier, but we're getting to the end here. Now, here's the thing. If Bryce Young can just take a step forward, and they've done everything they can. They got him a first-round receiver, a second-round running back. They went out and traded for Deontay Johnson. They added these veteran guards in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. They got a new coach in Dave Canales. The photo's on the screen right now of Dave Canales. If Bryce Young, a number 1 overall pick, by the way, great college player, can take a step forward this year, and I think he can in this new environment, you can get Xavier Legette finishing as a top 36 receiver, which makes him a slam dunk play. So to close the door on Xavier Legette, round 13 or round 14, he honestly goes, you can see right here, in some platforms, depending on the ADP, right next to Mike Williams. It depends on your build. If you need a stable veteran, you take Mike Williams. I've taken him in some drafts. I took him in that draft with Flock Fantasy and those guys, like we mentioned, I think in like round 12 or 13. But if you need some upside in this part of the draft, you don't have enough on your team yet, go ahead and get Xavier Legette. So these are 7 wide receivers you should be drafting in fantasy. But if you want to see the running backs, and there's 5 of them that you should be drafting right now, and you're probably not drafting enough of them, well, check out this beautiful video right here. All you do is you hit it, and it becomes maybe it becomes your favorite video you've ever watched. So why not do it? Click that video right there. I'll see you in the next one.